Okay, hello and welcome everyone. So I'm going to do a walkthrough of exam 1 for Principles of Micro course. So it starts with core principles, demand, supply, equilibrium, and then elasticity. The first 5 chapters of the Stevenson and Wolfers text. And what I'll do is I'll just show the questions here, and then the version that I'm going to actually talk from is going to already have the solutions marked, because the way that I release this is with the solutions at the very top. I did that, make it a little bit easier to actually take the exam. However, that doesn't make it as easy when you're going over the solution, because you have to keep running back and forth to find what the solutions had been. So I wanted to write it out and then go over it here, which is what I'll do. However, then I realized that unless you've got this, I don't know. So if you happen to see the whatever. So this way. This way you've got the, hey, kitty, puppy, kitty, puppy, kitty, puppy, kitty, puppy. All right. All right, sorry. So I forgot I had that in there. So anyway, so all right. So here, the first question, actually, I might as well show the key. So here is the key at the top. First question is for normal goods. A tax on consumer income will lead to a rise in their demand. Tax on consumer income will lead to a fall in their demand. Changes in consumer income do not affect their consumption. Most consumers would choose to purchase the good regardless of income changes. I wonder if I'm going to remember to edit out the puppy kitty. Probably not. Okay, so for normal goods, the tax on consumer income leads to a rise in demand. Tax cut. Right? So this is a tax cut. This means consumers will have basically an income increase, and we'd expect that'll lead towards an increase in demand for a normal good, which is what the question's about, or a decrease in demand for an inferior good, right? All right. Marginal benefit of consuming an item is, well, the difference between what a consumer is willing to pay and the actual price of the good. No, difference between the willingness to pay and the actual price is buyer surplus. The total benefit from buying several units of the item. No, this would be like aggregating up. Not quite total surplus, because it's benefit minus cost gives you surplus, but it'd be the benefit portion. So anyway, it's not that. The additional benefit from buying one more unit of the item. Yeah, that's marginal benefit. Marginal benefit, we're thinking of incrementalizing, right? Breaking down the decision into the choice of whether to have one more. The additional number of consumers who will buy a unit of an item. No, the way that like marginal enters with like consumers is when the price falls, it's the marginal consumer, it's the person with the next highest willingness to pay that's the first to enter the market, but that's not what this is saying. All right, so consider the decision to read your textbook on economics regularly. Which of the 4 core principles applies to the notion that each extra page, marginal principle, you read and each extra problem, still marginal principle, you complete will help increase your understanding of the material? It's marginal principle. This is one where when I read this, as soon as I see like decision to read your textbook on economics regularly, it starts off like this ought to be an opportunity, like it's going to talk about the sacrifice of doing one thing instead of the other. No, keywords here is extra. We're looking at the value of each extra problem. Matter of fact, that's why it's marginal principle and not cost benefit principle, right? Which of the 4 core principles applies to the notion for each extra page, breaking down from incrementally. All right, it's not cost benefit principle. It's not even the cost benefit. So something within the rational rule, right? We have incrementalized, we broke down to the marginal benefit and then the marginal cost, and we literally compare them. That's the application of the cost benefit principle within the marginal principle. That's not what's happening here, because this doesn't say anything about costs, right? This is just looking at the benefit. Okay, so decisions should reflect the opportunity costs rather than just the financial costs. Yeah, opportunity costs rather than just financial costs. Marginal principle breaks down quantities into iterative decisions, that use the cost benefit principle. Yep, that's right. So this is what I was mentioning a second ago. The marginal principle breaks down quantities, and then we use the cost-benefit principle, right? Yes, you would have used the opportunity cost principle, but the best answer here is cost-benefit principle, because these iterative decisions, literally the decisions, involve the cost-benefit principle. Assessing the benefit, well, assessing the cost involves the opportunity cost principle. But when we're applying the marginal, we've broken down the decision into smaller portions, into thinking about the contribution of one more. Then it's when we're comparing the marginal benefit to the marginal cost, we're using the cost-benefit principle. It's not interdependence principle, because we're not talking about the other things that are affected. And it's not, I don't know what a sunk cost evaluation is. There's a sunk cost fallacy, which is putting any credence on sunk costs, on costs that are in the past and can't be recovered and are irrelevant to future decisions. But that's not what a sunk cost evaluation is. All right. When interdependence exists between sellers in the market, then each seller relies on another seller in the market to supply its inputs. Nope. All sellers, that could be, but that's not necessarily. All sellers produce an identical product. No, this is required. This is like one of our assumptions for perfect competition. Each seller's best choice depends on what the other sellers choose to do. Yeah, that's the most close to interdependence principle. There must be a rising demand for any seller to increase its sales. No. All right, so right. So we have our commuter could choose either to Uber or to purchase a new car. The average their average cost one way is $15. So 5 days a week for 50 weeks a year, based solely on the cost of the Uber. What should they do? Well, let's see. So it's going to cost $15 one way, so $30 there and back. 5 days a week is $150 per week. Oh, so they should purchase the car if the cost of the car is less than $150 per week. Okay. Due to a decline in demand and popularity, Ford company is planning to phase out traditional sedans such as the Fusion and Taurus to focus on SUVs and trucks. Their sedans and trucks are complements in production? Nope. Substitutes in production. That's correct. Inputs in production? Nope. And products that do not follow the law of supply? No, that's silly. All right, so they're substitutes in production. What happens with a substitute in production is, so you wouldn't have to draw these pictures, but I just drew it because I wanted to draw the substitutes in production picture and talk about it now. So we're told that there's a decline in demand for sedans. So I've drawn a leftward shift in the market for sedans. This will lead to a decrease in the price of sedans, right? Lower price, lower quantity, right? So what's going to be the effect on trucks, say the F-150? A decrease in the price of a substitute in production means you should increase supply in the good under consideration. So the idea is, there's a fall in the price of sedans. Why should we spend, the idea with substitutes in production is that at least some of the inputs can be used towards either production process. So it's basically like, why would we waste effort making sedans as the price is falling when instead we could make F-150s? And so it's a rational business decision. And that's basically the idea, and that's the graph. All right, so what happens to the equilibrium price and quantity when demand decreases and at the same time supply increases, but the relative size of the shifts are unknown? All right, so I drew a leftward shift to demand, right? Demand decreases, leftward shift to demand, and then a leftward shift to demand, and a rightward shift to supply, and a rightward shift to supply, right? Supply increases, demand decreases, supply increases, and the relative size of the shifts are unknown. So I drew in the top picture, the demand shift was small. I drew a small leftward shift and a big rightward supply shift, right? So here, supply has the larger magnitude. And then in this picture, I drew a large leftward shift to demand and a small rightward shift to supply. Here, demand has the larger magnitude. I always like drawing my initial bolded and my subsequent dashed in case we haven't got colors. All right, so as a result, we see the price is going to fall here, and the quantity is going to rise. And in this picture, the price is going to fall, but the quantity is going to fall. So this tells me price is going to fall either way. Quantity could rise or fall. And I'm going to look for that amongst the answers. Equilibrium price falls and the change in equilibrium quantity is ambiguous, right? So this is like I've been saying before, if you draw the right picture, it'll give you the correct answer. I wouldn't memorize the pictures. I'd memorize how to make the pictures. What did I do here? Well, I drew the demand and supply curves doing what I've been told in the description. And then I paired them up where demand got the big shift in the bottom picture and supply got the big shift in the top picture. So this is literally like the big small method from the text, but I don't know. So the point is we want to look and see what's going to end up happening when supply is the predominant shift and what's going to end up happening when demand is the predominant shift, and then compare those two things. See what we can say with certainty. Price falls, and what we're not so clear on. Well, quantity could rise or fall. Which of the following is not a demand shifter? The price of the product, right? Remember, if price changes, only quantity can change. In order for demand to shift or supply to shift, you need something other than price to change. So for demand, price of a substitute, price of a complement, number of buyers, those are all demand shifters. And then price of the product is, that's going to give us a movement along the curve, change in quantity demanded. Business manages to become more efficient. As a result of this improved efficiency, it will increase technology, increase efficiency. This will lead to an increase in supply. Shift the supply curve to the right. Shifts in demand, always lead to increases in the equilibrium price. No, because it could get swamped. No. So no, because a leftward shift is good. I was going to say it could get swamped by the supply, but no, because a leftward shift in demand would give us a decrease in price. Lead to price and quantity to move in the same direction. Yeah, we can reinforce that with a picture here. So here I've got a leftward shift of demand. Here I've got a rightward shift of demand. In the top picture, I've got a leftward shift. Quantity and price are both falling. In the bottom picture, I have a rightward shift of demand, increase in demand. I have quantity and I have price both increasing. Yep, they both move in the same direction. Always lead to an increase in equilibrium quantity. Nope, not if you have a decrease in demand. Same as A. Lead to price and quantity moving. No, shifts in the supply curve will lead to price and quantity to move in the opposite directions. You should draw the corresponding pictures, right? All right. The basic logic between the rational rule for sellers is that company owners should increase output as long as the extra output. Rational rule is telling us keep doing this as long as the marginal benefit exceeds is at least as big as the marginal cost, right? The marginal benefit is like the price, as long as that's at least as big as the cost, right? If we do this, it's going to add more to revenue than to costs. It's not moving the company towards maximum total revenue. We want to maximize profits, right? And the rational rule for seller isn't saying anything about maximizing revenue. Leads to a larger gap between price and average total cost. Sometimes that happens, but that's not what the rational rule. This is sometimes incidental, but it's not the goal of the rational rule. Company leads the company towards minimum average total costs. No, so that'd be almost like a scale sort of argument, but that's not what the rational rule is doing. This is almost by definition, actually. So that's why it's not. In all cases, you want to choose the best answer, but this one is almost by definition. So it's this one. All right. So suppose the percentage change in quantity demanded for water for any price change is 0. Oh, no, we've got perfectly inelastic demand, right? The demand curve for water is perfectly inelastic. The price elasticity of demand is perfectly vertical, right? Demand curve is vertical. Price elasticity of demand is perfectly inelastic. Yeah, so price elasticity of demand is the percentage change in quantity divided by the percentage change in price. If there's a 0 percentage change in quantity, this gives us a fraction that's overall 0. And sure enough, you can see in the graph, if we have a vertical demand curve, it doesn't matter what happens with the price. Quantity is not going to respond. It's the same quantity. Let's see. So they're going to a coffee shop to get a latte. Their willingness to pay is 6. The price is 2. The coffee shop costs the coffee shop $1. How much economic surplus do they receive? This is the coffee shop receive when they purchase the latte. Okay, so willingness to pay is $6. The price is $2. The cost is 1. Buyer surplus is 4. 6 minus 2. Seller surplus is 2 minus 1. Right? So that's this right here. And then overall, this is total economic surplus. All right. Price elasticity of supply measures responsiveness of sellers to price changes, by definition. Which of the following events could cause the demand curve for butter to shift to the right? So what we want to do is we want to look at each of these and draw the associated effect or the associated picture. So the first one, the price of margarine, a substitute, decreased. Price of bread, a complement, increased. The income of consumers increased in butter is a normal good. Price of cream and input decreased. Oh, so I need to move. Sorry, this is that fell off the right. That fell off that line. Anyway, so why did this happen? That's from something else. But here's question 17. So part I was a decrease in the price of a substitute. Decrease in the price of a substitute would lead to a decrease in demand because you're going to buy the substitute instead. Increase in the price of a complement, that'll lead to a decrease in the demand for the good. Same picture, because you'll buy less of both. Increase in income for a normal good, yeah, that'll shift demand. So what's consistent with a demand increase? Yeah, an increase in income for a normal good. What about a decrease in the price of an input? No, that's going to shift supply. That's like the technology question, the technology advance. Yeah, so the right answer here is going to be whichever one corresponds to 3, and that was E. All right, suppose the market for oranges is currently in equilibrium at a price of $1 per orange. Quantity transacted is 1.5 million oranges per year. Following events occurred, what impact would they have on the equilibrium price and quantity for the market for oranges? Assume oranges and apples are substitutes in consumption. All right, so the good under consideration is oranges. We're also going to get some information about apples, a substitute. So you want to remember that they're substitutes. All right. Item 1, poor weather in Washington State destroys a portion of the apple crop. All right. So we have a decrease in supply of a substitute. So we'll think about how that affects oranges. New farming techniques reduces the per unit cost of producing oranges. Oh, that's going to be a rightward shift to supply. New research suggests eating oranges are beneficial to overall health than previously believed. That's going to be a rightward shift to demand. Okay, but let's look at this. So here we have a decrease in the supply of a substitute due to this, destruction of the weather, or this bad weather destroying the crop. That's going to lead to an increase in the price of a substitute, which is going to lead to an increase in demand for the main good. That'll tend towards price rising and quantity rising. If we have a decrease in production costs, I already said that'll be an increase in supply. That'll give us a decrease in price, increase in quantity. And the last one was an increase in demand. This is like the health effects one. Higher quantity, higher price. Okay, so then what we want to do is we want to look and see what's common. I put squares around the things that are in the same direction and circles around the things that are in opposite directions. So quantity is always going to rise. I know quantity is going to rise for sure, and price could rise or price could fall, right? All right, so I'm going to look for quantity always rising and price having an ambiguous effect. That happens here, letter D. Right? All right, suppose you observe the equilibrium price and quantity of beef have fallen, holding other things constant. Which of the following could be consistent with this observation? So if I have whenever it says consistent, it's going to be an approach very much, you can kind of tell we're going to follow the same sort of approach as before. But what happens here is if it says consistent with these observations, this is leaving the door open for having both demand and supply moving, possibly in opposite directions. And we want to know, even if the supply effect or even if the demand effect kind of goes against what we're looking for, if the other one's the dominant effect, we could still get whatever is the outcome we need, hence still consistent. Right. Assume that beef is a normal good, barbecue sauce is a complement for beef, and chicken is a substitute for beef. We observe the equilibrium price and quantity of beef have fallen. Now, without doing anything further, we know price and quantity has fallen. What is this? What do we know? By virtue of the fact that we see price and quantity both having fallen. Demand must have shifted to the left. It must be a decrease in demand because price and quantity went in the same direction and it was lower. Now, what this means is, could be consistent is, I'm always looking for things that are going to give me a decrease in demand. I could get something that gives me a decrease in demand and then an increase in supply or a decrease in supply, as long as the decrease in demand is the dominant effect, right? So that's what I'm going to be looking for. Consumers experienced an increase in income, and there's an increase in the number of beef producers. So that'll be an increase in demand and an increase in supply. Oh, well, that's going to give me a larger quantity, so it can't be this one. The price of chicken has risen and the price of barbecue sauce has fallen. So we have a rise in the price of a substitute, which means we'll buy more, an increase in demand for the good under consideration. The price of substitute has fallen, we'll buy more, an increase in demand for the good under consideration. So that's not going to work either. It's been announced eating too much beef can be hazardous to your health. Yeah, there'll be a leftward shift to demand. So 3 is definitely consistent with a decrease in price and quantity. And then the number of beef producers has declined and the price of chicken has declined. This is a decrease in supply. That'll tend towards an increase in price and a decrease in quantity, but the price of chicken has declined. Decrease in the price of a substitute is going to lead to a decrease in demand for the good under consideration. And if demand shifts further to the left, then supply shifted to the left, price could fall, and that's consistent with this observation. Now, let me show you with graphs. Whoops. Oh, puppy. Okay, so that was... I have this set, so I thought it would be a little bit less delicate than it is. All right, so that is... I can get just close enough. I should edit this out. I'm not going to edit this out. I'm just going to make a fool of myself. Show this puppy picture. All right, so here it is. Let me see if I can... Yeah, I learned long ago not to take myself very seriously. All right, so consistent with price falling and quantity falling, right? Well, it's not one, because we get an increase in demand and increase in supply. That'll lead to an increase in quantity. 2, increase in price of a substitute, decrease in the price of a complement. This gives me an increase in demand, increase in price, increase in quantity. Oh, that's a problem because we need quantity to fall. And then 2, price of a substitute, price of a complement. If the price of a substitute rises, price of a complement falls, this will lead to an increase in demand, which will tend towards an increase in price and an increase in quantity. So that was bad for 2. Now for 3, we have a decrease in demand. Yep, that's exactly what we want. And then for 4, we had a decrease in supply and a decrease in the price of a substitute. Well, the decrease in supply tended towards price rising and quantity falling. The decrease in the price of a substitute this led to a leftward shift in the demand under consideration. That gave us a decrease in price and a decrease in quantity. And if this was a stronger effect than this decrease in supply, sure enough, item 4 is consistent with this observation. So that was this. All right, let me just move this so I don't have that problem I had before again. When I click back. All right. So 2, consider the market for oranges. What we expect to happen to the equilibrium price and quantity for oranges if the following events occurs. Market price of apples increased, particularly the cold winter in Florida destroys a large portion of the orange crop. All right, so we got a problem. We want to know what happened to equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. We have 2 goods. We're considering the good under consideration. The good we're focusing on is oranges. We're told something about apples, but we don't know how apples are related. Sure enough, if you look down here, apples could be substitutes. Apples could be complements. Apples could be substitutes. Apples could be complements. All right, so what we want to do is we want to be able to determine which of these is happening. So, all right, I like to kind of scan at what the choices are doing just so I know kind of the structure of what we're trying to figure out, especially because we didn't say anything about are these substitutes or complements, and now we see, oh, sure enough, this is buried down as part of the things we're choosing between. So that's where that information is getting used. Let's go back to the information we have. So we know the market price of apples increased. So this is either an increase in the price of a substitute or an increase in the price of a complement. And we know of a decrease in supply. So we have a particularly cold weather in Florida, destroys some of the crop, so we have a decrease in supply. All right, so what I'm going to do is I say, all right, we've got two main goods. If they're subs, we've got an increase in the price of apples. That'll lead to an increase in demand for oranges. If apples are complements, we'd get a decrease in the price of oranges, right? Increase in the price of apples means we'd buy less of both, right? And then a decrease in quantity of oranges. But it turns out if apples are substitutes, the price of apples rises, we get an increase in demand for oranges. At the same time, we get a decrease in supply of oranges from the bad weather. These are both actually a recipe for an increase in price, right? Increase in demand, consumers are competing with each other, the price goes up. Decrease in supply, we have more relative scarcity, and so price goes up. This one, quantity goes up. This one, quantity goes down, right? So we have price rising, quantity rising, price rising, quantity falling. So item E was price rises and quantity rises or falls if apples are substitutes. The other thing that could happen is, let's see, we could end up having price rising or falling, right? So the decrease in price falling. So the decrease in supply is going to give us an increase, is going to tend us towards an increase in price. So the other thing that could happen is we could get an increase in price or a decrease in price if apples are complements, and quantity falling. So the bad weather is going to tend towards a decrease in supply, which gives us an increase in price and a decrease in quantity. If apples are complements, we're going to get a leftward shift of demand. That'll give us a decrease in quantity. So if apples are complements, either way, we're getting a decrease in quantity, and we could get price rising or falling. Well, it turns out, though, that wasn't among the choices, because for the ones where apples are complements, it tells us price will rise for certain and quantity will fall for certain. Nope, because we know we want quantity to fall, but price could rise or fall. And then in this one, it says quantity will rise for certain. No. Impact on price is unknown. Yeah, the impact on price is unknown, but if apples and oranges are complements, we needed for quantity to fall for certain. So that's how we discount B and D, and that's how we zero in on A. All right, E. All right, so suppose the initial equilibrium price of blackberries is $3 per pound. If the price of strawberries, a substitute for blackberries by consumers, increases, what happens to the market for blackberries? All right, so the price of strawberries, the price of a substitute increases. This means an increase in demand for the good under consideration. We'll get an increase in the price of blackberries, an increase in the quantity of blackberries, which means, there will be, at the original price, we've got this problem. Switch over. There'll be a shortage of blackberries at $3 per pound, and as a result, the price has to rise, which will decrease quantity demanded and decrease the quantities and increase the quantity supplied. And the picture for that is this one right here. So we have an increase in the price of a substitute. Relative to strawberries, we've got price rises, quantity demanded of strawberries falls. Relative to the good under consideration, blackberries, we're going to get an increase in demand, right? Price of a substitute rises, we get an increase in demand. That's going to tend towards price rising and quantity rising. Well, at the original price of $3 right here, this old equilibrium, there's now a shortage after the demand is increased, because at this price, now the quantity demanded is way out here. This is the quantity demanded at $3. The quantity supplied at $3 is out here. So there's a shortage at the price of $3, right? Because quantity demanded is bigger than quantity supplied. By definition, that's a shortage. So price would have to rise, and in doing so, the quantity supplied rises and the quantity demanded falls until we reach the point where quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. Okay. Suppose the price of coffee mugs falls 25%. As a result, the quantity demanded rises 50%. So quantity demanded goes in the numerator, percentage change in price goes in percentage change, quantity demanded goes in the numerator, percentage change in price goes in the denominator. And as a result, I wrote this as 2 in absolute value to match these answers, but I should have been a little bit more consistent here. I should have wrote this with a negative, or this whole thing with absolute value bars or whatever. I don't know. But yeah, so this is 50 divided by 25 is 2. So the type of questions that I give would always have all the choices are positive or all the choices are negative. For price elasticity of demand. For cross price elasticity of demand, then sign really matters. And for income elasticity of demand, sign also really matters. Okay, so because positive cross price elasticity of demand tells us we have subs, negative tells us we have complements, positive income elasticity of demand tells us we have a normal good, negative tells us we have inferior good. All right, so if the elasticity is 1.5, that's elastic, and price decrease, what happens to total revenue? All this tells us we have a price decrease when demand is really responsive. It tells us that for this price decrease, the quantity demanded is going to more than proportionally increase. So total revenue should increase. Suppose the demand for truffles is very elastic, but the supply is very inelastic. Which situation gives us the greatest increase in the consumption of truffles? So if you can't visualize this, or if you can't get this from the idea of like really elastic demand, and we're trying to get a really large response in terms of the quantity demanded, you'd have to draw the pictures. I just drew the first one, but you could draw the remaining pictures. So you have to draw demand as being pretty elastic, pretty flat, and supply is pretty inelastic, pretty steep. And then you draw like the increase in supply, decrease in supply. Decrease in supply goes the wrong direction. Decrease in demand goes the wrong direction. So you'd pretty much be looking at the increase in supply versus the increase in demand. But think of what's going to happen. You can visualize an increase in demand. You have to increase demand quite a bit to be able to get a substantial change in quantity. So for the similar size change, like 10%, 10%, you're going to get a larger change in quantity for the 10% rightward shift to supply than for a 10% rightward shift to demand. All right. At a price of 24, we're selling 36 at price of 24, we're selling 36. Price of 30, we're selling 36. What's happening to our demand? Demand's not responding to price. So demand is perfectly inelastic. Percentage change in quantity is 0. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to conclude here. I don't know, why not? I'll show you my sketches. So here's the puppy. One more time, and there's puppy, and there's kitty. Puppy and kitty. Puppy, and I'm frustrated. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. See you next time.